There we go. And I think without further ado then, Anna, we'll just come straight to you and you can lead us off.
Thank you. So I don't know, Laura, I don't think we've met. I came to one of these that you did, I think, but I don't think we've kind of formally said hello. So hello.
No, it's lovely to meet you, Anna. Hi.
And you.
Hello.
And obviously Saskia and Pilar, hello. Know you both.
Hello.
Hello. So as kind of a brief introduction, so I'm kind of developing a portfolio career for myself at the moment and kind of following my interests and my curiosity. And so, yeah, doing some work as a coach, particularly coaching around neurodiversity to help neurominorities be the best that they can be at work. And I've also been doing some consultancy work as well. And I have a blog, which I'll possibly mention briefly later, but yeah, people can ask me about that if you want. So I have a kind of proposed structure for today, but I didn't want to impose it. I thought, as we're going to be a small group, I don't want to kind of impose my structure on people if it's kind of not what you're expecting. So I suppose my plan was to spend about kind of 15 to 20 minutes sharing some of my thoughts about what makes curiosity and connection important for me and kind of where they've led and what they've enabled for me. And then I'll just let Roger join. Hi, Roger.
Hey Anna, sorry I'm late.
It's all right. I've literally just introduced myself, but as we know each other, I don't need to do that again anyway. So that's great. I'm
going to be really rude and run and get my cup of tea. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing from one meeting to another. This is probably radical behaviour.
It's fine. So yeah, so my kind of proposed structure was to kind of spend 20 minutes kind of talking through my thoughts and then put you into breakout rooms to have a conversation in pairs to kind of talk about a topic of your choice, and then the other person will bring curiosity and connection to that topic or help you identify your own connections, and then have 10 minutes to switch over and then potentially a 5-minute kind of quick chat about how that was in your pairs before then coming back to the main room and kind of having about 15 minutes to kind of reflect together on, yeah, what's come up for you. I suppose my question was, I don't know whether any of you have got anything specific you wanted to explore in this workshop and whether you think that structure will help you to do it, or if you've got any kind of specific questions or anything, kind of, yeah, how that matches what you're looking for from today, really.
I don't have anything specific yet. Something might come up as you talk, but not for.
Okay. And Saskia and Laura, you're both nodding, and I know Andy said it's fine for him too. So we'll crack on with that and see where we get to. And Roger can just come back with his cup of tea when he's ready. Oh, here we go.
I'll work it out.
So I shall endeavour to share my screen.
How hard can it be, eh?
Well, how hard can it be? So you should all be able to see that slide.
Yes.
So I was thinking before kind of today, I was thinking, should I do slides or should I not do slides? I was thinking what would actually be really helpful for me is to create a mind map to help me organise my thoughts and kind of see what it is I want to talk about and how the things are connected. And I will say that this is an iterative process. So even when I was looking at it again this morning, I've kind of changed some of the things around and deleted some things off it. So it's very much kind of my emerging thoughts and work in progress. But I will start with curiosity. And I think the first time I kind of explicitly started to think about curiosity was when I was in an internal consultant role in local government. And we were being trained to take a systems thinking approach and work with managers. And curiosity was very much around how do you help managers become curious in the systems thinking approach, and how do you kind of help them be open to looking at things from a different perspective. So it was kind of useful, and we talked about Egan's skilled helper model, which I'm not sure how many of you are aware of. I see a couple of you are nodding, Pilar's shaking her head. So the Egan skilled helper model, I think it originated from counselling actually, but the kind of first stage of the model is really to understand the other person's world and where they're coming from and maybe what challenges they have and kind of what they want to achieve. So there's an element of curiosity in that, I'd say quite central. But I felt as a consultant, that curiosity was very much guided by a predetermined intent and a desired outcome, which was almost, I'm trying to make you curious in my method. So, and I'm trying to understand a way in to help you be curious about my method. So it kind of wasn't genuine curiosity about the other person's position or experience with no desired outcome at the end of it. And then if we fast forward a few years, I started finding out about mindfulness and mindful attitudes. And I put a picture of a tree on the slide because there's a picture in the Mindfulness for Dummies book, which I really like, where it has the mindful attitudes as kind of the roots of the tree. And then the idea that if you water the roots of the tree and actually actively aim to cultivate those attitudes, then they will grow fruits. So you will get more of those attitudes. And I think there are about 7 or 8 of them, but I've kind of picked out 3 to talk about today. So the first one being curiosity, but the second one being the beginner's mind. So the beginner's mind talks about approaching something fresh, as if it's fresh eyes for the first time, almost like a small child would look at the world, and that kind of sense of wonder and fascination, and letting go of kind of assumptions. Oh, I've seen this kind of thing before and I know kind of what might happen. So I think that's very strongly linked to curiosity. And there was a quote in the book that Suzuki Roshi, who was a Zen master, reputedly said that in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. And I really like that quote, but I found it really challenging when I first came across it, and particularly in the context as working as a consultant, where we were kind of being told that we needed to build our expert power in order to influence managers. And also, I think it was very easy to get sucked into this. You know, we've seen a different way of working and a systems thinking approach, which is better. Therefore, that is the right way to do things almost. And you know, we're trying to help take you on a journey to get to see the world in that way, which is kind of contrary to the beginner's mind and kind of that actually neither of us know what we're going to find if we kind of start looking at things and kind of where that might take us. And I guess that links into the third attitude, which is letting go. And that can be letting go of anything. But the kind of thing that I've been thinking about, possibly struggling with to a certain extent, kind of over years, I would say, is the idea of letting go of desired outcomes and an attachment to an outcome. So the idea that things are good or bad, or, you know, in a work context, the idea of this is where I want to get people, and actually to what extent are we getting where I want us to get to. And actually, I realised when I was off with stress that letting go of that attachment to the outcome would be really beneficial for my mental well-being, and to kind of focus on the journey and the curiosity rather than the destination. So this picture is a snapshot of Steve Chapman's 10-year plan. And I've kind of zoomed in on the first 2 boxes where he says, do stuff and see what happens. And for me, this is kind of the curiosity feeds very much into the see what happens box. And that if we can kind of act in this way, that's a way through the anxiety of uncertainty. So it's almost letting go of the outcome and just genuinely seeing what's going to happen. So this is kind of one of the things I changed this morning on the slide. So I'd got my triangle kind of linking from the letting go box to the see what happens box. But I thought, actually, I think it's letting go its beginner's mind and its curiosity that all enable that kind of genuine, I'm going to let go of what I, you know, my expected outcome, and I'm genuinely going to be curious to see what emerges. So kind of linked to that is possibilities can emerge. And I think the tendency to kind of, particularly for me, but I think in general, the tendency to overcome that anxiety of uncertainty can be to overplan. And I'd rather take a curious attitude as a way through that anxiety rather than I need to nail everything down and know exactly what I'm going to do, and then I'll feel better. But actually then that potentially stifles possibilities from emerging. And then more recently, I've started thinking about how letting go can actually give us more confidence to act. So I went to a webinar recently that Professor Ian Robertson gave, where he was talking about confidence. And he said there were kind of 2 elements to confidence. So there's the capability expectation, which is the extent to which you think you can or can't do something. And then there's the outcome expectation as to the extent to which you think your desired outcome can or can't happen. And he said that if you think you can do something and you think it'll have your positive outcome, then that's where confidence sits. And that made me think, well, actually, if you take away that dimension of whether something can or can't happen or not, and just think, I'll see what happens, does that actually expand the possibility for confidence and increase that ability to act? And I do find that that's kind of true for me at the moment, and kind of being in that very much see what happens mode is helping me take more action. And then an example of the event that I did for the Kinder Leeds Festival last year, I kind of very much approached that. And again, this was kind of nicking from what Steve Chapman talks about, but around kind of having a curious question behind what you do, rather than a kind of, this is how I want people to leave, or this is what I want them to take away from an event. Because actually, I don't know what you're going to get from today. I didn't know what the people were going to get from this event last year, but I can kind of have a curious question myself. And for the Kinder Leeds event that I did, my question was, how can coaching help cultivate kindness? But then my question behind the question was ultimately, how do I think I can help make the world a kinder place? And interestingly, I think so preparing the presentation for the Kinder Leeds event that I did helped clarify my thinking about what is it about the coaching principles that helps cultivate kindness. So I kind of answered that question. And then after the event, I noticed that I was actually offering practical kindness to people more. So not just doing it through coaching conversations, but actually kind of seeing that, you know, my neighbour's very ill, and actually we offered to cook meals for them and things. So that was almost an unexpected consequence for me of having talked about kindness and being explicit about it and talked about it on LinkedIn. It kind of filtered through to my own behaviour outside coaching as well. And then Marcia Reynolds is an executive coach who works in America, and she talks about curiosity as a way to let go of judgments so that we can engage in non-judgmental listening. So everybody makes judgments, but actually if we can come back to the person that's talking with a genuine curiosity to understand their experience better, then that kind of helps let go of that judgment. And obviously that's really helpful in coaching. And then following curiosity links to fulfilling work, because hopefully it's then following your interests and doing things that yeah, are going to be fulfilling because you're interested in them. So moving on to connections. So I think the kind of key thing for me that's important about making connections is it is that way of making sense of the world. And I started doing this through doing system pictures of trying to, you know, capture a whole system on a page and what was going on and how things link together. And then, as you can see, from kind of doing more mind maps, and I've started to make them a bit more visual with more pictures and less words recently to kind of help do that. And then also through kind of writing my blog and even doing poetry is kind of helpful in terms of helping me make sense of what's going on. And then the multidisciplinary, again, I think it kind of brings a richness to things. So the example that's always stuck in my mind, when I was working on an all-age disability project, we had an occupational therapist in the team, and he was working with a family, and they had a young toddler who had cerebral palsy. So she couldn't sit up, she was just kind of lying everywhere. So they ordered a special high chair for her. And typically the physio would have gone and set up the high chair with the family. And we didn't have a physio within the team that I was working with. So the occupational therapist thought, you know what, I'm going to ring the physio, going to ask them what they normally pay attention to when they're setting up a chair, and kind of ask if they're happy for me to go and do it. So we had that conversation, and he did, and she was more than happy, I think, to let him kind of go and set it up. But he was able to look at it from an OT perspective around, you know, presumably safety and maybe how high the tray was and whether it was kind of manageable for her. But the physio would look at it from a perspective of posture and how's it going to help develop her muscles so that she can learn to sit up on her own in the future, which is not something that he would previously have thought about. And then creativity for me is making connections. So I know people talk about kind of creativity as actually saying what's obvious to you, and what's obvious to you will be genius to other people because they've not thought of it. And for me, creating connections is kind of a key part of that. And then support networks, again, are important because, again, it's kind of connections between things, but also connections between people. And for me, that's kind of helped me get fulfilling work because I found out about Genius Within and neurodiversity coaching through the Association for Business Psychology, which I've been part of the committee for. So kind of following those networks and the things that I'm interested in helps me get fulfilling work. And again, a kind of key part of, if the work involves sense making, then that will make it fulfilling for me as well, even if that's helping a coaching client make sense of their world for themselves. Then that kind of helps. Which leads me on to, I talked a bit in the podcast around creating a more inclusive society for people with neurodiversities. And this is, I suppose this links into curiosity and connection, because I told the story on the podcast about my family member who's autistic, who's kind of received verbal abuse in the street because he's acting a bit oddly, or as people wouldn't expect him to act. And I suppose my hope is that if you get more people with neurodiversity in the workplace, and then if somebody sees somebody acting in the street, they might think, oh, my colleague sometimes does things like that. So I wonder, I bring my curiosity and I think maybe something similar is going on for this person. And then maybe how can I help or how can I support, rather than shouting at them for being different. And then I think everything that I've talked about links to mental well-being and improving mental well-being. And again, this is something that I altered on here this morning because I had got it coming from certain boxes, but then I was thinking, do you know what, I think most of what's on there kind of links to mental well-being, which again is really important for me. So that is everything I wanted to share. So I will stop sharing. And then I don't know if before I shove you into breakout rooms, whether anybody's kind of got anything that they want to share or that's coming up for them on that.
I can chime in on the thing you started with, actually, which was the Egan framework, and so that's one that I use, and I've experienced the same lesson, I think, which is if you use it to listen to someone in service to your intent rather than in service to curiosity about them, you're just completely dead before you even get out the gates. So that resonated for sure.
Laura.
Yeah, it made me think loads, actually. It's really it's funny how things happen at a particular time and you think, oh, I didn't realize how useful it was listening to you. So I've just started a new job, and so it's just learning and listening as much as possible. And whilst on one hand everyone's saying, oh, just take your time, listen and learn, you know, really boredom or really like lovely, and yeah, take your time. There's also the other narrative is like, what's your plan? And everyone wants a plan. And it really resonated when you were just sort of saying that, sort of just see what happens. So I would love to just listen and learn and let things unfold, but the way sort of organizations are run, and my team are desperate for me to tell them, desperate to go like, right, so what are we doing? What do I focus on? Where are the key, you know, can we have another meeting about where are our priorities? What, you know, so it's just really interesting. And I guess thinking about how that feels very present for me at the moment. And I realise how attached people are to feeling like they know that they've got a plan and what's going to happen. And there's an emotional security with that, isn't there? Of people feeling, as long as I know what I'm doing, I'm fine. So it's just making me think, I have this not thought through, but how do I help try and sort of develop, you know, help with this curious mindset where it's like, well, yeah, let's just see what happens, where people also feel held and sort of comfortable and don't feel kind of abandoned and left to sort of, you know, just dwindle. You know, people really have a need to know what's going to happen in a world where we can't give them that, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that kind of almost sums up my kind of, I think, where my questioning has got to myself as well, in terms of, so how do we create the conditions that generate other people's curiosity in a way that helps them deal with that discomfort of not knowing? Because I think that is the key kind of thing that gets in the way. So that's helpful.
I'm picking up on two things kind of associated with that. just the business of, you know, the beginner's mind and opening to possibility, which I kind of associate with abundance. And most of us live in a world of scarcity, I think, most of the time, which is that, you know, desperate need to kind of narrow down and, you know, hold things, reduce the uncertainty. But there's always, it's a continual balance between the abundant expansion and the narrowing to focus to actually do something together, which is just a dynamic that's always there. And I think the other thing that was coming up for me was you mentioned difference a bit towards the end. And I once knew a guy who used to talk about the most important thing, Roger, he would say to me, is the coexistence of difference. Holding the coexistence. How you meet difference, because our society tends to like monoculture, smooth out the differences. And when we can't smooth them out, we fight about it. But meeting difference with curiosity and a spirit of abundance is a real kind of practiced art. What's this for? Don't know.
Help you think.
No, it was for your benefit. I thought, okay, this business about kind of beginner's mind, it's like, what the hell's that about? Is Roger just a fiddler? And I kind of am sometimes, but I thought if I played around with this, it might either distract you from what I was saying or throw in, whoa, what's the, okay. Spark something.
So I think what I will do then, because I think that's kind of been some interesting initial reflections. I think if we put you into breakout rooms, then my suggestion was, so person A picks a topic that they want to talk about, and that could be something that, you know, is just sparked from the conversation we've just had or kind of what you've heard, or it might be something that you're kind of struggling with or thinking through on a personal level. So it can literally be anything that you want it to be. And kind of talk about that, and you'd have 10 minutes to talk about it. And then I would suggest person B brings curiosity to help person A become more curious about their topic. So not following person B's curiosity necessarily, but thinking, okay, so how can I help person A be more curious? And then at some point in the conversation, kind of think about, so, okay, so can we look at, is there something else that you can make connections with that might help you gain clarity or a different perspective on what you're thinking about? So either of you might come up with a completely unrelated topic that you think, how about this? Does this? So I suppose if person A picks something else that they're interested in that's completely unrelated, potentially, and they might think, okay, what are the similarities? What are the differences? And then metaphors can be quite useful as well in terms of identifying connections, because you're essentially taking the characteristics of one thing and applying it to something else. So again, if person A mentions a metaphor, person B might pick up on that and explore that, or person B might throw in their own metaphor, or you might just go, okay, so what's the metaphor then that might help you think through this, and kind of explore where that takes you. And then switch over so that, you basically switch roles. So you've both got the opportunity to have a topic and the opportunity to kind of explore that curiosity and connection. And then, do you want 5 minutes to chat together, or do you want longer to come back as a main room and kind of just chat on how that was as a group?
I like longer as a main room always, because I want to know what people talked about.
Okay. So we can do that. So 10 minutes each, and then I'll bring you back and we'll have about 15 minutes before the end of the session. Okay, so now this is my experiment.
Will you give us a 10-minute warning then, Anna?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I want 2 breakout rooms. I can do the maths, and then Andy and me can stay here if you're happy with that, Andy, if I can work out how to do that. In fact, it's done it already. It knows that that's what I wanted. So let me put that for 20 minutes.
I hope you two are going to do it as well.
Sorry, say that again.
I hope you two are going to do it as well.
Yes, indeed we will.
Marvelous.
And I think that should work.
So, and it might have something to follow up from the last thing I heard that Andy was saying. So something that during the conversation came up for me was, so we are curious and we want curiosity to lead us, and also we want to encourage other people to be curious. And in concretely with Laura, we were looking at the tension between wanting to be curious when you're working in company of people who actually want a plan or want a strategy. So that was maybe the context. I was thinking, so what happens after we're curious? So what do we do with that curiosity? What do we do with what we discover after that? This is a philosophical question. So that's what opened up something for me. Yeah.
Yeah, for what it's worth, that does link to the thing we were just exploring as you came back in, because I think what was going through my mind was, at the level of the individual relationship, it feels like arriving with an agenda is not a great idea. So like, don't have the outcomes there. But then once you've had that relationship develop and you're trying to achieve something together, it feels like outcomes are inevitable. So, you know, having them and making them explicit, but perhaps having them co-produced is what matters. But I think the other thing for me there is there's a different sort of trap, I think, at that point, which is that you get so preoccupied with the outcome that you forget to focus on the stuff you need to do to get the outcome, you know? So I just wonder if it's different phases and different contexts that need to be in view there.
And I suppose I'm wondering whether intent is different from outcome, and can you be clear intent but let go of the outcome? So the outcome is almost, this is where I'm trying to get to, it's your destination, but actually, and that maybe shouldn't be too clearly defined, because stuff can emerge and other things can pop up, and yeah, it allows in other possibilities. But actually, if you're just taking action without a clarity of intent, you could just be scattergunning in a very random way. And is that helpful?
I'm also thinking whether directing the curiosity, I mean, I'm going now, like I was saying to Laura, I do like modern philosophy thing, but whether directing the curiosity, so is the curiosity here about the person? Is it about the opinion? Is it about the situation? Is it about the context? Sometimes that might help.
So we didn't talk about this, but just chuck it in the mix, because it's a bit of a contrary view for a minute. That so I'm thinking in a parent-child scenario for a minute, right? You can be relentlessly curious about your kid, and at times that clearly is really helpful. But I also wonder whether at times that perpetuates a power dynamic that would be better to dissolve. So by pretending to be like completely without needs, completely devoid of a perspective or an agenda or whatever, does that actually create a false relationship with the child? So I don't know where to go with that, but it's just an alternative spin on, should we have no outcome or agenda in mind? Or should it be that actually the point about being curious is to be sort of capable of being genuinely empathetic with that person, but maybe it's okay to expect them to be empathetic back? I don't know.
And I suppose that was one of the questions I was thinking of. If you're curious about somebody else, is that going to make them curious in you? And the conversation I came to was probably not necessarily. So thinking of conversations I've had as well, where I've kind of brought curiosity to the conversation, but it's all been one way and it's not kind of come back. But I do think if you're curious about, I suppose, my hypothesis is, if you're curious about what somebody else is interested in, does that make them more curious about what they're interested in themselves? And is that helpful just in a general cultivating curiosity? And then that might spill out into other things in their life because they're just generally becoming more curious.
I'm on a course at the moment with Nora Bates, and if you've never heard of her, you can look her up. And the thing we've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 weeks, believe it or not, Saskia, is playfulness. So as we got into our group, Saskia offered playfulness as a topic for curious exploration. So there was an immediate link in my mind, which I didn't reveal, to this stuff that I've been talking with a whole load of other people about. So that was lovely to actually be, able to be a bit playful around the issue of playfulness. And then I threw into the pot the topic of kindness, my own kind of struggles with my tendency at times to withdraw from others, where I kind of my soul is saying, just be kind, Roger, and my head is saying, that's just going to open up a can of worms. And being honest with myself around that. And Saskia immediately pointed to the issue of, basically, do you ever think you need to be a bit kinder to yourself, Roger? She didn't quite say it like that, but that was how it landed. So it kind of went quite deep quite quickly. It was nice.
Nice.
And we ended up talking about, I mentioned the Robert Keegan's thing. I don't know if you ever read any of his stuff about immunity to change, and about how each of us has one big thing. He calls it one big thing with capital letters, which is the one big thing that stops us developing or changing. And the thing about our one big thing is that we are unaware of it ourselves, and anybody who knows us is blindly obvious. So Saskia was challenging me about whether I've ever asked people who know me well what my one big thing is, which I'm not sure I have, but that's kind of interesting to play with. I think playfulness is so important in meeting the things which are otherwise challenging or embarrassing or excruciating or buried. Or just been really nice, Anna and Saskia.
Likewise. And we even had poetry as well. And I was really by within 10 minutes each, kind of. You can do a whole lot with 10 minutes, can't you? It's pretty amazing.
The poem at the end was quite cool in terms of timing.
Did you make up the poem, or did you read something?
Yeah, I read it. No, I read it. It's something that I wrote a while ago, but it sort of came up in conversation, so I read it at the end. And actually, it was bizarrely resonant with some things that were being said earlier on.
There's this, I've put a link in the chat box about something that sort of links to the playfulness thing, but a separate link to the playfulness thing that was going through my mind was the conversation Anna and I had was in part about the beginner's mind bit that we touched on. And I guess one of the reflections that I'll take away from today was that I wonder if the beginner's mind resonates for two different reasons. One is that, there's the kind of beginner's luck bit and all the being unencumbered by the theory and all the rest of it. But a slightly, an alternative spin on that same point, but alternative spin is, I was saying when I play golf, I've got to a point where I'm pretty decent, but the minute that I actually think about the technique, I go from being pretty decent to utterly rubbish. And so for me, like when I'm playing golf, the trick is to play golf, not to go through the technocratic process of trying to swing the club, I think there's something of that in the beginner's mindset thing too, of like just recognizing that you've got some abilities and they're instinctual and just play with it. So the beginner's mindset doesn't mean you have to be an expert, I guess is the point.
There's a chap called Bernie DeKoven, Dekoven, who is dead now, but his whole life's work was about playfulness, as far as I can make out. If you look him up, there's a whole load of stuff. He's put most of it in the public domain. And I was thinking, wow, you can have a job in being playful. How cool.
Yeah, there's also something on YouTube by Bo Lotto, and he talks about playfulness as the way out of the uncertainty as well. And he's got a video clip of dolphins kind of blowing bubbles and then swimming through them. Yeah. So if you kind of Google or search on YouTube for Bo Lotto, I think it was the first one that came up that I found.
There's something just you said, Andy, about that when you were talking about the parent-child thing, and you know, is it helpful always to sort of just have that real sort of, you know, almost like that beginners, you know, I'm endlessly curious. And I was just thinking when you were speaking then, there's also something. So I find there's something. My sister does this to me all the time. Much that I love her. But she's a therapist. It's always like that. That's when someone's speaking, she goes, "I'm completely kind of no agenda, blank canvas." I'm just like, "No, you're not," you know. And there's something about the authentic, and just you're saying there about, you know, just trust your instinctive. There's something about the authentic of like, no, we're not, you know, trying to deny what we bring, as well. Doesn't kind of, we can come with a beginner's mindset. But we also do come with quite a lot of baggage, some of which is probably useful, some might not be, but it's being aware in some ways of what that is, I think.
Yeah.
I agree. I wouldn't state this too strongly, but I do occasionally have a bugbear where you find yourself in a room of lovely people that are involved in improvement work and all the rest of it, and you get phrases trotted out like, of course nobody's really, you know, got the answer, and I sometimes I want to turn around and say, yeah, but you know, I've got a fairly bloody good idea. Been doing it 20 years. So don't have the whole of the answer to life, the universe and everything, but maybe I have some clues.
Yeah.
That's slightly flippant, and in similar flippant mode, seeing as we're playing, I'm deeply nervous about what it's going to do to my internet history to click www.deepfun.
It's all right.
So I'm going to live with uncertainty and click it in. Out of curiosity.
I think it's okay. I haven't dug too deep.
Well, I think we're out of time, but that's been lovely.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody.
Well done for taking the plunge, Anna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for organizing that, and everyone. Really enjoyed it.
Lovely to see everyone.
Yeah, really good.